pedal when the lane moving fast. Hey, let them all cross. If they hate, then let them hate and make a bigger boss. Hey.
Is up, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals, because at the end of the day, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve, so you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I got a very special guest. I'm going to bring him up here in a little bit. We're going to be talking a lot about data and safety, data. How do you turn that into like a competitive tool out there? And if you're a fleet, like, you got to understand how much data your equipment actually puts out there, and how do you leverage that in today's environment. But before we do that, you guys, you know what we got to do? We got to dive into our This Week in Freight segment, powered by my friends over at DAT. And today is going to be a flatbed. And this is all viewer submitted. Like I always told you guys, if you guys want this, if you guys want me to help you assess your lane and kind of like what goes on out there and look for that pattern recognition, I need you to email my team, podcast@thefreightcoach.com. All right. All I need is a shipping city, a delivery city, and an equipment type. All right. Data leaves clues. All right. And a lot of these lanes kind of perform the same throughout the year. And we're here to talk about that. And this one today, you guys, is going to be Sacramento, California to Salt Lake City, Utah. First things first, miles, right? 650 miles. If you got to ship this Thursday to Monday or Friday to Monday, it's going to be more expensive than that next day option. That is kind of right in that middle of what most guys can do in a 24-hour period out there at that 650-mile mark. But here's what I want you guys to pay attention to. Now, this lane is, it's a power lane, but the Salt Lake market as a whole is generally low volume coming out. We got a lot of, we run into the Salt Lake market pretty often. So a lot of the carriers that we are booking, they go to Salt Lake, they have that outbound freight out of there. But historically throughout my career, going into the Salt Lake market has been a more expensive one, because outbound freight is just kind of sporadic out there. There's not a ton of volume, compared to other markets that you see. So those are one of those things you want to take into consideration as you're going out there and bidding freight in there, especially on flatbeds. But here's a couple of key data points. So if you look at the 1 year, historical market, it was pretty much sitting right at $1,900. And, again, that's above the $3 a mile mark. But I want you guys to pay attention between February of this year and last year. All right. There's almost a $300 rate increase that happened right there. And then within the last 7 days, we're almost like $600 higher than what it was at this time a year ago. Okay. So from my perspective, again, we all know what's going on in regards to California and the CDL stuff that's happening, as well as fuel prices. But I am, as somebody who operates 99% open deck freight, and of that 99% of the open deck freight I move, 75% of it is moved out here on the West Coast. We're noticing pockets of tightness that are happening out here. Now, I'm not going to be an alarmist and wave the white flag on anything, because ironically, this time last year, the month of March showed some pockets of tightness that was going on out there in the market, specifically on the West Coast here. So I'm not quick to ever change course on a lot of these things, because I think right now what we're seeing is the seasonal kickoff to open deck freight. Okay. And what does that do? That drives a short-term bump in freight volumes. Now, I hope it stays up, because like I had mentioned, you guys, I just do open deck. Like my brokerage, we specialize in this stuff. So it would be good for my business overall, and especially with new opportunities. But this is one of those ones that I can directly tie the rate increase that we're seeing out there to a couple of key headlines that have happened with fuel prices, as well as the CDLs in the state of California. So is there tightness that's happening? Yes, there is. There is no doubt in my mind you're seeing that out here on the West Coast. Would I go as far as going in and blowing up my entire pricing strategy just to capture some short-term stuff. I'm not there yet. And I say that because if this goes on throughout the month of April, because last year around this time, March was tight, and then it kind of started to break apart about mid-April, and then things got back to kind of normal by about early May. And I think that at times where and especially right now, when this market has been kind of dragging along for as long as it has, it forces people to want that knee-jerk reaction to be like, everything's all great, the sunshine, gumdrops, all that stuff. And especially when you see it all over social media, you want to go in and think that you need to do it. I'm not going to tell anybody what to do. I'm just letting you guys know what we do. We're kind of last to the party in a lot of this stuff because I know it's an opportunity for us to capture volume. And sometimes people are too quick to react, and then service failures start to increase. And we like to price our freight to move it. And we're not afraid to operate at smaller margins here in the interim as this transitionary period happens. So specifically for this lane, say Sacramento, California to Salt Lake City, Utah for a flatbed, I can point out directly to two key items on why pricing is higher. So if you're in a spot market style customer, adjust accordingly, obviously. But if you're out there operating with contracted freight, I'm not there yet. But that's where I'm at with it. So I would take that to heart. This lane, though, it's got miles. There's a lot of carriers for it. Capacity. This will be like one of the last lanes that would be affected overall in the event that there is any drop in capacity. But that is it for This Week in Freight, powered by my friends over at DAT for Flatbeds. Again, if you want your lane broken down on the show, email my team, podcast@thefreightcoach.com. But let's get into it, you guys. Let's talk about some data and all of that fun stuff out there. I got my good friend Einar Markussen on the show, who's got probably the coolest backdrop that I've had. That's real. That's not AI, you guys. That's his actual garage. So Einar, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Chris. I'm looking forward to spending the next 30 minutes with you.
No, same here, man. I'm constantly scouring social media, and I'm trying to find people like I can only talk about like current events so much, because I got a business to build, right? Like I got a lot of stuff going on, and I can't just talk about the flavor of the week on social media. And I just love interviewing people that have been in the industry for a long time, that have seen markets before, seen changes before. And I think, I forget who tagged your company in a post, but then when I started looking into your company, I'm like, I like what these guys are doing out here. I want to reach out and have them on. So I appreciate that. And, so before we get into any of that, man, how'd you get your start in freight? What brought you into transportation?
So, by the way, I love your flatbed discussion, because that was the first terminal manager job I ever had, was doing heavy haul flatbed. So only spent a year in it, but I still cut my teeth as a manager in that. So I got my start in 1992 in the finance department at Chemical Lehman Tank Lines, right? Most of you longtime trucking folks might have remembered the name. So they ended up, 6 years later, merging with Montgomery Tank Lines and became Quality Carriers, which is a nationally known tank trucker, right? So I spent my first years in finance and then quality, and then I got into an opportunity where I was doing some reloadable dispatch type work at the corporate office. And then, after the merger, I ended up, staying local. It didn't go down to Tampa, Florida. And I ended up, a couple years later, ended up with General Electric in their trailer leasing division. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So you got pretty good experience out there. What happened where you were like, I got to go out on my own and start something different here? What was it?
So at some point, and not everybody, has that urge, but, I had been in, leadership roles in the field for lots of good companies, General Electric. And then I ended up with 13 years with Bulkmatic, and then a couple of years, most recently, with a petroleum hauler here in Pennsylvania. And, it was one of those things where I felt like I wasn't getting any younger, and I have a lot of experience, and I just felt like now's the time. It's never perfect, right? So sometimes you just got to go for it. And that's what I did at the latter part of last year. So,
with you working in the bulk fuel side of things, like, safety is of the utmost importance in any mode of transportation, but your guys is like literally life or death style freight out there. One bad move can literally be catastrophic from a life loss standpoint, but also from an environmental standpoint as well. How much differently is safety taken, do you think, in that compared to other modes?
Well, there's a lot of chatter in the industry the last 6 or 8 months, about some of these, the drivers and some of these commuting carriers and some of that kind of thing. In my experience, when you work in hazmat or chemicals or, just tank truck food grade, there's a lot of things you have to do right, in order to make sure that the customer or the product's handled properly. It goes without saying that the drivers that you hire in those modes are going to be probably the best you can get, right? And a lot of those drivers have hazmat endorsements on their license, right? So they already have been some vetting going on. And you don't have a lot of this stuff that's going on in the industry, with the long haul van segment. You don't see that in that particular area. But back to your question about safety, back in June of 2023, I had just started with Pentank, and there was an unfortunate situation in Philadelphia where the driver had was involved in a fatality accident, and the I-95 interstate road collapse was a result of that. And unfortunately, he perished. And certainly an experienced driver, you just don't have a second chance. Sometimes you have to be dialed in all the time. And that's one of the challenges, right? Everybody wants to get their gas. They want it now. They want it cheaply, and they want to go to a 24/7 convenience store kind of setup. But think about it. That means that drivers have to bring that gasoline to the stores a lot of times after hours, right? Because of traffic and other concerns. And sometimes we need to think about the difficult nature of that job. And, the credit goes out to those guys, those professionals in the industry that are really working, the most risky job there is practically in transportation is doing that kind of work. So
how are you balancing that out, though? I mean, from a safety perspective, because obviously there's multi-stops that are made throughout the night. Like, I have minimal experience even doing bulk loads, tanker loads. Like I'm a very much a niche guy in my experience in the industry. But it's like, if you look at situations like this, and again, like the additional training that goes into that stuff, like, because you see that argument now being made for like all modes of transportation. Like, hey, we need to look at, I'm not advocating for governors of, or speed regulators on engines or anything like that, but you're looking and you're starting to see that filter down. But, when you had brought up like, hey, it was an experienced driver, like things happen out there. Right. What were some of those kind of after information that came out that, kind of caused that?
Well, I'm not going to talk a little about the accident per se. It is a public record. The NTSB data is out there. But what I can tell you is that when I went around to talk to other drivers at other terminals shortly thereafter, a lot of these drivers wanted to know what happened, right? And at that time, we didn't always have all the answers. But the bottom line is, if you're going to be in this industry and hauling this kind of product, you have to have your mind set on safety first. You can't be distracted. You've got to focus on those critical things like speed, like the traffic around you. And certainly technology can help, but it doesn't take the place of a professionally trained and focused truck driver. So technology can help, and there is a place for it, but a professional driver who wants to do a good job, they are at the core of every good trucking company, and they start with that, right?
Yeah. And I think that, when you're bringing that up, I obviously there was, and not all the information is out on this one, but there was that unfortunate crash at LaGuardia that happened the other day, and a lot of this stuff that comes out when accidents happen is like Unfortunately, it's really the only way to get safer out there is for things to happen that maybe we don't have a lot of information on. So then we can look at our SOPs and our processes. And, one thing that kind of comes to my mind now is obviously autonomous has such a big push out there in regards to autonomous vehicles. And, Waymo's massive out here in Phoenix. But then like we're looking at autonomous trucks coming about. And, I'm of the mindset that like when it comes down to it, I don't know if the public or government's appetite is there yet for like widespread 80,000 pound semis, let alone hazmat going down the road with nobody behind the wheel.
Right. Well, I think at some point, in controlled environments like the testing going on in Texas, there is, and maybe even in ports, right, where there's a controlled kind of layout, there's opportunities for autonomous, right? But a lot of the modes that are not just long haul, drop and hook, there needs to be a professional truck driver that actually loads or unloads, like in tankers, right? Because, you can't have an autonomous vehicle do a lot of that kind of thing. So I think at some point there's a place for it. And I'm super excited to have done the Waymo thing in San Francisco last week. So I was very impressed. However, I think there is, some kind of the public does not have, let's say, the appetite at the moment to be looking up and seeing an 80,000 pound truck and trailer with no driver. I think that's a kind of a scary thing. Now, it's not my focus area, but certainly I think there's a place for some of that. But I think that the professional truck driver who's trained and has been given the tools to do a good job and is supported by their organization can do a lot of good things. And I think some of the things that have gone over the last 6 or 8 months, 10 months about, the non-domiciled CDLs, the community carriers, double brokering, some of that, mayhem. I don't think that's representative of most of the professional truck drivers out there today. Yeah. And it's a small percentage. You just get a lot of press,
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you. Again, I'm not saying it's not out there. And I've been very vocal on this show about where things are, but I don't know if it's as widespread as a lot of people want it to be. Again, it's very easy to push a narrative out there. Like I could take really divisive stances and say some like really outlandish shit on this show if I really wanted to. And it would be great for my viewership, right? Because you just talk about, you take a hardline stance on one thing and you're just going to bring up the people who are about the hell yeah. And then the guys who think that they want you to die for saying anything like that. But, I think from my standpoint, I think it with where we are with safety and automation in regards to like autonomous trucks, it's coming whether people want to admit it or not. But I also look at it is where is the opportunity, right? Like I think that we're past the point. And you look at all the safety equipment inside of trucks right now, inward facing cameras, outward facing cameras, all of the safety, the automatic braking systems that are all, there's a lot of stuff that's out there.
That's right.
I think that people want that perfection end result in like the R&D phase. And I just think like, just because it might not be appealing today doesn't mean that it's not going to happen in the future. And if there's a way for it to work, it's coming, right? And I'm a trucking purist at heart. I just look at it as like other industries that are out there. You just look at flying, for example. We talk about the planes have essentially been taking off and landing by themselves for a long time, but I'm not getting on a plane if there's no pilots in the cockpit, like no matter what. So it's like, I view it as how could trucking look different with autonomous trucks, but like drivers behind the wheel still. And I think like it's only a matter of time before it's going to be our reality. And I think it's only a matter of time before it will be exponentially safer to transport goods via autonomous trucks than anything we've ever seen.
Right. And I think you're right that at some point, if you look at some of the reasons for some of these, large truck crashes, right? Human behavior is something that you can't remove from the cab, right? And, whether it's the passenger vehicle that, comes into the truck or the truck, does something, we're still talking about humans, right? And human behavior is something that, we can do our best to train and kind of work through some of that. But at the end of the day, drivers like anybody else are human and they make mistakes, right? And those mistakes sometimes are costly. But I think that we as an industry should be very proud about how far we've come. There was a couple of, maybe a year or two around COVID when some of the statistics weren't that great. But I think the industry's really tried hard to kind of overcome this narrative, at least recently in the last year. And the FMCSA and some other government entities have really done a good job to try to, maybe close some of these loopholes, right, that have been exploited, which have also gotten a lot of press. But I would say that the best or leading class trucking companies or fleets are the ones that they don't skimp on some of the basics, right? And the basics are you're hiring good drivers, you're training them properly, you're putting resources into the equipment. It has the technology that's available, right? And you're also doing a good job in maintenance, right? And you're also doing a good job in going through and finding out where there's problems as you encounter them and you address them. Technology can help, but technology is not going to take a company that's not doing those things and turn it into a great carrier. So, technology is a tool, just like some of the tools and some of the, changes that have happened in the industry with regards to like the, roll stability, for example. That's a great tool because it can prevent, in most cases, a situation where the truck might roll over, right, going around a turn or what have you. That is an example of a tool, right? And I think, if we can just, focus a little bit on some of the things that we know work, like driver-facing cameras. We know forward-facing cameras are good, but the dual-facing setups are the best. In fact, having a multiple 360 type of view is the ideal situation, right? And trailer cameras and truck cameras integrated, really using all the tools available can really help. I think there's a little bit of a kind of a challenge with some of the industry just does not want to go to the driver facing camera still. And it doesn't have to be the large ones. It could be the small ones too. But I think there's this misperception out there that, all the drivers are going to quit, right? Or all of them, are going to have a real problem with it. They're going to go, they're just going to rebel against it. I think all of that, it is kind of similar to what happened when electronic logs came out in 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
A lot of folks didn't want to move away from paper logs. You remember that time period, right? And I think today, if you ask a driver, for the most part, I think most drivers they're accepting of the electronic logs. It's just the way it is today. And you can't stop the progress from happening. So I think how the implementation is handled, how the rollout is done, how the time and energy is spent to making sure that you have good data coming from the systems as you kind of roll them out. If you have, a great system, but you haven't worked out the pilot properly, you're going to have problems. And that is just going to set people back from taking advantage of the return that's available. And you're also going to have to do a lot more to kind of overcome that resistance that happens when drivers start chatting amongst themselves about how all the, some of the events aren't accurate, it's bad data and it's just a distraction. So I think one of the things I've learned is that the more time and energy that you can put into making sure the rollout is done properly, it's going to be that much more successful. And you can overcome that driver resistance to the driver facing camera. And, there's always going to be some drivers that aren't going to want it, right? And a lot of the owner operators, they may have forward facing and that's their prerogative, right? But if a big fleet that wants to, do the best they can, having just a forward facing camera is kind of like the analogy I use. And I'd say this to a few clients, it's like having the window open in the wintertime and you wonder why it's cold, because you're not getting access to all that data that's available. And the AI dash cams today, they're pretty good at what they do. And
Yeah.
a lot of the leading edge ones, they can prevent accidents from happening. And they do provide a wealth of knowledge and information about what actually is happening in the cab. And if companies are serious about getting safer and improving, reducing claims, getting better insurance rates, and operating as a best in class type of carrier, they're going to want to have that kind of information.
Yeah. I think that we're at a point in the near future where insurance is, I don't want to go as far as saying like they're going to, require it by law or anything like that. I could just see it being more of a requirement than a lot of people want, whether it's, I think they're going to have to start with outward facing cameras. I could see outward facing cameras being a requirement in the not so distant future. Inward facing requirement. I don't know about that yet, but I also look at it is like, again, when a lot of these things happen, this just opens up an opportunity if you want to go out there and compete, right? Start your own business, but like, I also look at it as dollars and cents add up quick when you own your own thing. And if your insurance, which insurance is one of the highest expenses for a lot of fleets out there, if we're looking at a 20 to a 30% cost savings that can come along with the implementation of cameras, I think anybody's going to look at that as a very serious addition to their fleets out there. But I've said this for a long time now, Einar, and I truly feel this way. Unfortunately, trucking companies are guilty until proven innocent. It's not the other way around. And if I own trucks and when I own trucks, you better bet we're going to have stuff on there that protects our investment, improves our innocence.
Right. And that exoneration factor is one of the big keys to when you implement the driver facing cameras, is that, in the old days, whether it was a rear ender, it was a stage accident, you're right. The trucking company ended up settling because they did not have evidence or proof that they were doing the right thing. Right. So, like anything else, I think this has, in a lot of fleets, after they've adopted the, kind of the dual facing camera setups, it's amazing at how many times they would have an accident or a claim where they wouldn't have that. Now they have it. And, when you're talking about some of these nuclear verdicts, 10 million or 100 million for thermonuclear, right? Having the ability to kind of, exonerate the driver and the company is so huge that, those who don't are essentially leaving that tool in the tool bag, and not for really, I think, ultimately the best reasons sometimes. So,
yeah, I look at it where, you talked about staged accidents. There literally was just 2 attorneys in the state of Louisiana that were sent to jail for this, right? So it's like, again, I look at with where a lot of things are, and it's like you have to be on the offense to protect your company. And, again, I get the invasiveness of it, but I also understand that as margins continue to be compressed out there, and I'm of the mindset that people are always going to continue to push for cheaper. Like, no, whether I agree with it or not is irrelevant. But I look at how people are out there purchasing goods in their private life, and it's eventually going to bleed in to this sector, and somebody's going to crack a code here sooner than later on how to move it for less, how to make more money, all of that stuff. That's just the beauty of where we are as a society right now. And that's why entrepreneurs are going to always change the world, man, because somebody's out there thinking of it, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that has happened that people are like, oh, that'll never come to trucking. I just think it's only a matter of time. And you have to look at it as there's an opportunity behind that.
That's right. And I think too, when you consider a professional truck driver, I sometimes use the analogy in my prior years where, a professional baseball player or golfer, they're getting video analysis of their swings, right? Or their mechanics. And they're going to want to try to work on that mechanics, right? No different than a professional truck driver. So if you explain it in that way, and so long as they endear to be a professional, then, sure. Is it going to catch you when you make a mistake? Sure. But that's not there for that. It's there to get better and to help improve and reduce risk. And if folks are all kind of working from the same page and using it fairly, and not trying to play games, I think you can get the best results from really using all those tools. Now, there is, consent laws. Each state has their own kind of thing you have to follow. And it is a little complicated, but I can tell you, some of the carriers that are on like third or fourth, contract, with some of these larger providers, right? The ones out there that are offering the cameras and the ELD package and some of the other, of course, all the telematics, right? After you've gone through a couple of those, rollouts and then implementations, and then you've kind of worked with it for a couple of years, a lot of these companies are taking advantage of it. And as a result of that, they have an advantage in the marketplace against those who are not, because they are doing a better job on all areas, because the data is helping them ensure that they're making those decisions. And if you don't have some of that stuff, well, then you're still back in the 1980s, maybe, in a way, right?
No, I agree with that. Einar, thank you so much for your time today. How does anybody reach out to you if they want to find out more about what you got going on?
Well, thanks, Chris. I can say that I have a website out there called STC Americas. I'm available on LinkedIn, whether it's 2 hours or 2 weeks or a conversation about an issue. I'm happy to help. Based outside of Philadelphia. And I've been blessed to be able to, meet some great tech folks and some industry folks over the last 6 months. And I got to say thanks to all of them for helping me get started in this. And looking forward to talking to you again, Chris.
Perfect. I appreciate it, Einar. If you guys can't find him out there, hit me up. I will gladly put you guys in contact with him. But that is going to be it for today, ladies and gentlemen. As always, if you got value in what you heard and you're not subscribed, subscribe to the show, you guys. If you're feeling ambitious, rank that show on iTunes and Spotify, because if you see value, your network's going to see it as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Came back with a bang, window down, yelling out money, anything. Hey, ooh, got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when I'm getting to the bag. Hey, got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when the lane moving fast.